Instead of a console or a PC, you're using Google's data center as the platform. We handle the intense gameplay processing and graphics, so there's no console required to play your favorite games. That's what Stadia is all about, the games.
Oh, no, 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 no. At the time this video is being written, Google Stadia has been live and available to the public for a little under a week, and the response from the overall gaming community has been, well, mixed. Opinions on Google's first foray into the video game industry absolutely runs the gamut. Depending on who you ask, Stadia is either a promising yet flawed new entry into the streaming games market, or it is the spawn of Satan guaranteed to destroy the gaming industry from the ground up. But if you ask me, the conversation surrounding Stadia is a lot more nuanced than some people would make it seem. Now don't get me wrong, Google Stadia's launch has been absolutely terrible. Google has screwed up our first impressions of Stadia in every way imaginable. The vast majority of the biggest features that Google used as Stadia's selling points, such as its deep integration with YouTube or 4K browser streaming, or even basic features such as voice chat and multiplayer, simply aren't present. On top of that, many of the games on the service are old and overpriced, and the service simply doesn't have the quality and consistency that we were promised leading up to its launch. But I don't believe that the missing features, the weak selection of games, or the underperforming connection quality is the real issue here. In fact, I believe that many of those issues can be fixed over time. However, my issues with Google Stadia are larger and much more fundamental problems that I have with video game streaming as a whole. I believe that we, as a gaming community, have been focused on all of the wrong things, while the real problem has been hanging over our heads like an anvil from Looney Tunes. You see, my real issue with video game streaming has nothing to do with Google, or even PlayStation, Microsoft, or any other video game company in particular. I am much more concerned that we are about to enter a major turning point in the video game industry. Stadia is only the tip of the iceberg, a hairbringer for things to come. And if we don't make our thoughts known to the video game companies here and now, we might get trapped in a video game environment that looks nothing like the industry we know and love today. Because unfortunately, the birth of video game streaming means the death of video game ownership. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. Let's back up. My name is Kindle Fire. Welcome to No Flex Gaming, and these are my thoughts on the real problems with Google Stadia.
One place for all the ways we play. This is Stadia. Gather round.
I believe that most people would agree that the concept behind Google Stadia and streaming video game platforms in general is, at the very least, intriguing. In case you didn't already know, the main selling point of Google Stadia is the ability to play top-of-the-line, graphically intense video games without needing to purchase any computational hardware. You buy a controller that connects not to a console or PC in your home, but to Google servers off somewhere in the cloud. Every time you press a button on the controller, that signal is sent off via the internet to Google servers, and the video part of your game is streamed back to your television. Anyone can play games at the highest fidelity possible, assuming that their internet speed is up to snuff. Translated to English, that means that Stadia games should have unimaginable graphical fidelity and scale. But of course, that means that to take advantage of Stadia's power, games would need to be specifically made to take advantage of Stadia servers. And that leads to my first issue with Stadia, the content problem. Like I said earlier, the game selection on Google Stadia is, as of writing, abysmal. Google Stadia has 22 games total. And these games are not anything to write home about. For every new game, like Grid or the upcoming Cyberpunk 2077, there are ancient titles like Tomb Raider Definitive Edition. Anyone that really wanted to play Mortal Kombat 11 has already done so, and doesn't want to spend another $180 just to play it on Stadia. However, I think that some people might have overblown this issue. Sure, Stadia doesn't have the best games library, but that can be improved with time. Google has already promised that it will be investing in its own first-party game studio sometime in the future. And I would expect that as the service grows, more and more third-party studios will be committing to putting their titles on the service. But it remains to be seen whether those games are really worth buying on Stadia. But my next concern about streaming games doesn't have to do with Stadia specifically. It has more to do with the concept of game streaming itself. Although the concept of streaming games from a website can seem exciting, I'm afraid of what could happen if several other companies decide to try their hand at streaming games as well. Look at the streaming television market, for instance. Remember the old days when all you really needed was a Netflix or a Hulu membership to enjoy pretty much all the best shows and movies on the internet? But now, in 2019, it seems like every single company needs to have their own streaming site. If you really want to watch all the best television, you have to invest in dozens of streaming services from companies such as Apple, Disney, AMC, CBS, ESPN, HBO, just to name a few. There are so many of these services that subscribing to all of them means that your monthly cost will skyrocket and become more expensive than just buying a cable subscription and being done with it. Imagine a world where EA, Activision, Sony, Google, Microsoft, and even a few other large technological companies such as Amazon get into the streaming games industry. Imagine if each one of these services has their own exclusive games, locked behind a $10 a month premium subscription. Imagine that if you want to play Madden, you have to pay for EA Access Online. Or if you want to play the newest PlayStation exclusives, you need to pay for PlayStation Now Plus. That might sound a little far-fetched, but maybe it isn't. Amazon already has one of the largest networks of internet servers in the world, and is rumored to launch its own video game streaming service in 2020. PlayStation already has PlayStation Now, and Microsoft has Project xCloud. And then of course, there's Google with Stadia. And of course, if these services make money, we can be certain that they will have their own exclusive games and partnerships with game developers to make their services more appealing. Imagine if Google pays Bethesda a huge six-figure payout just to have exclusivity on the next Elder Scrolls. But what happens when you buy a game on these similar services? That leads me to my third problem with Google Stadia, and that's the ownership problem. In today's world, the transaction between consumers and game developers is clear. If I buy a copy of a game today, I am free to do pretty much whatever I want with the game, as far as my personal enjoyment goes. But imagine if tomorrow morning Sony decided that it was no longer going to support the PlayStation and was exiting the video game industry. What would happen to your games? Well, of course, you would lose access to any of the games that you didn't have the chance to download, but your disc-based games will continue to be playable for the lifetime of your console. Any game you buy on a disc would still be usable, no matter what decisions Sony or anyone else made in the future. And even your downloadable games will be usable, except of course for their multiplayer components. Now what about your games on Stadia? What if 3 years down the line, Google decides that Stadia is no longer a worthwhile investment for the company? Picture yourself, someone that has invested hundreds of dollars in real currency in digital games that you cannot download, touch, or feel. What happens to your investment if Stadia shut down? Do your games just disappear? You don't have any hardware to download the games to, so where would they go? And what about a more sinister scenario? What if a publisher decides that it no longer wants its games to be available on its services? What choices would we, the consumer, have? Google attempts to address this issue slightly in the FAQ on its website, saying the following: outside of unforeseen circumstances, Stadia will aim to keep the previously purchased title available for gameplay. But what sort of unforeseen circumstances might motivate Google to remove a game from the service? These are important questions that we, the gaming community, need to ask before investing in any gaming stream services, and I am personally not satisfied with the answers that we have given so far. Unfortunately, I've sounded extremely negative in this video so far, but that is not my intention. The premise of stream-only gaming is interesting, and I'm certain that there are a lot of amazing things that the right companies can do with the technology. However, I don't think we are quite ready for it just yet. Google clearly isn't, and hasn't been able to follow up on many of the features that it promised would launch with its service. Being able to play our games wherever we want sounds incredible, but I hope we aren't being led into a dystopian gaming future where ownership is a thing of the past. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Google Stadia. I really want to know how you guys feel in the comments. Have any of you tried Google Stadia, PlayStation Now, or any other video game streaming services? Do you think the technology is cool, or do you want things to stay the way they are? Let's start a real conversation and let companies like Google and Sony really know how we feel. If you enjoyed the video, I hope you would consider subscribing. We upload think pieces like this regularly, alongside our usual live streams and gameplay videos. And if you really like our content, hit the bell down below so you're notified whenever we upload or go live. Anyway, I really appreciate you stopping by and hope you have a great day. NFG out.